And it is that while the lethality of their power is greater than ever, their capacity to impose control over the politically awakened masses of the world is at a historical low. Namely, in earlier times, it was easier to control 1 million people. Literally, it was easier to control 1 million people than physically to kill 1 million people. Today, it is infinitely easier to kill 1 million people than to control 1 million people.
The smoke in the air of our Concord bridges and Pearl Harbors is always smelled first by the farmers who come from their simple homes to find the fire and fight.
But if you embark on instituting a society where government protects you from yourself, you're in big trouble, and that's what they're doing. That's all government is force. I mean, do you have a choice about paying Medicare taxes? This government uses force to mold behavior or mold the economy. They've overstepped the bounds, and they violated the whole concept of our revolution and our Constitution.
Well, it's Thursday evening, and once again, it's time for the Freedom Link here on the Orion Talk Radio Network. I'm Joe Joseph, along with my good friend Tim Watts, and we're about to take you on a 2-hour journey of mayhem, chaos, and confusion.
That's what we specialize in.
Yes, but before we do that, I want to talk about something that's really been kind of getting under my skin lately.
Let's get under your skin, Joe.
Well, let me tell you what's getting under my skin. Society is getting under my skin. I've been having a big rub with society lately. I don't know. It's really been bothering me. And we can get into a whole host of issues, but yeah, I'm going to put my... I'm not one to philosophize, Tim. I'm not a philosophizer. But I will tell you this. There are times when you must look and reflect on things and think things through critically, Well, one thing that I saw as a result of this last election, right, was big divisions opening up between, you had different social classes, you had different income brackets, you had different colors, different religions, and everything else. And it seems like the divide and conquer tactics are really, really starting to ramp up. I mean, they were there before, and people have fallen prey to things like the false left-right paradigm, and they've fallen prey to this idea that there's more than one race on this planet. Yeah. Because last time I checked, it's just humans.
Exactly.
We've got all sorts of different cultures, but as far as races are concerned, there's only one. Yep. Hence the reason why they say human race. If you fell for the old put your check by the block of your race thing, then you're an idiot. That's the only thing I can tell you. Think through it logically. Now, I've heard a lot of things on this network over the past couple of weeks, and Orion Talk Radio has received emails expressing disappointment. And I, too, am very disappointed by the way things have gone and things that were said. And I just want to make things perfectly clear from the Freedom Link's perspective. Free speech comes with responsibility. And the First Amendment protects the right to free speech. But free speech is only okay as long as you're not infringing upon the rights of other people. You cannot. And that's the thing, again, in our society today, Tim, there are two things that are really lacking. And the first one is personal responsibility.
Yep.
The second is respect. Nobody respects one another anymore.
Boy, it's gotten to that, hasn't it?
Right. And free speech, to me, doesn't cover hate speech. Doesn't do it.
No.
Just doesn't do it. Because why? Because it infringes upon other people's rights and civil liberties.
Yeah.
Case in point, we've been having a lot of, let's just say, Jew bashing going on.
Oh, God, please.
Well, I'm bringing it up because it's pissing me off.
Yeah, I know. I really tire of this subject, Joe. I've totally had it with that issue. It's
Me too.
Me too. Zionism, the state of Israel, the Israeli government, open game, fair game.
Right. And now listen though, but seriously, in this country, part of the First Amendment is your freedom of religion, and that means if you want to worship Ronald McDonald, you're welcome to do so. And I have to respect you for that because that's your decision. Yep. And that's your right. Not bestowed to you by society, not written in any piece of paper or legislation, but given to you by the Creator himself. He says, hey, you're free to worship whoever you want. You're free to partake in any religion you want. Hell, you don't have to worship anybody. And all of us have to respect that. Why? Because this country was founded as each person being a sovereign, and that no one was subject to or had subjects underneath them. And so, as sovereigns, 314 million of us, we must respect the rights of other sovereigns.
Yep.
And that's where we stand.
Yeah, this nation was, founded with, religious principles, and yet we still give people the right to be atheists.
That's right.
Yep, you have rights.
Hey, free will can be a pain in the neck sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's true. And so what happens? Well, over the years and decades and centuries, we've fallen prey to societal norms, to cliques, if you will, to despots, to dictators, you name it. But they have skewed the way that this country was founded, its founding principles, and the way it's run for a long time now. Things have been bastardized. It was only in the last 100 years or so that we actually had a legal age. That before the age of 18 being a legal age, parents decided when their son or daughter was ready for adulthood. That it fell upon them, that it was their personal responsibility to ensure that their son or daughter was ready. Marriage. You didn't used to have to go get a marriage license. Marriage is a covenant between a man and a woman and the Creator. It's that simple. You don't need an intermediary. You don't need the state to give you permission. There's nothing that the state should be involved with. Same thing with guns. You want a gun? You should be able to carry a gun.
Amen.
Since when do you need to ask permission for something that's your right? But we, as people in the American society that we live in today, we play the game. We accept it. Why? Societal norms. And so, folks, we have to push through. We have to push through the societal norms and understand that the only way we're going to win this fight is by unifying, by uniting together and seeing past all of the divide and conquer tactics to understand that without everybody working together and respecting one another and being responsible members of, quote, society, only then will we be able to regain our republic. You can sign secession documents from now until the cows come home. But as long as personal responsibility is absent, you will not have a free republic. Any thoughts, Timmy?
Well, we don't have the right to infringe on others' rights. I mean, that's what it essentially boils down to. I know what some of these people are trying to get to. Zionism is a big issue. The state of Israel is a big issue. But you know what? Israeli people are not bad people.
No.
And Jews are not bad people. Are there some bad people? Are there some bankers that happen to be Jewish? Oh, yeah, sure. Absolutely. But you know what? If I want to go through history and I want to look at every evil Protestant, every axe murderer that might have been Methodist, Am I supposed to say, yeah, you Methodists, you're part of the problem. You Protestants, you're part of the problem? Because I can find them. I guarantee you I can find every axe murderer and every crook and every killer, by any denomination I want. Wasn't Hitler a Catholic? Something like that? I mean, for crying out loud, you can pick anything. And then what are we supposed to do? Just lump everybody into one thing? You're all the problem. That's not the solution here, folks. The solution is to articulate the problem and not cast everybody into one group. That's not what this country was founded on. Everybody, as you said, Joe, has religious rights. We've all got, we've got our free speech rights, too, but some people take free speech a little too far, and we'll talk about that after the break.
Yeah, you got it, buddy, so don't go away, folks. We'll continue our conversation when we come back. Until then, this is the Freedom Link on the Orion Talk Radio Network. We'll be back in 3 minutes. Don't forget, folks, if you want to email me, you can email me by sending an email to the freedomlink at centurylink.net. That's the freedomlink at centurylink.net. And I'd like to give a shout out tonight to Jason in Massachusetts and our loyal listener, Kathy. Thanks for tuning in and sending those emails. And to all the other listeners out there, thank you for sending your emails, your kind comments, and your responses. I read everyone and I respond to everyone, maybe not as expeditiously as I'd like, but I do respond to everyone. And so keep them coming because it really helps out. It helps the show and helps, keep things fresh. Joe Joseph here along with Tim Watts. And Timmy, you were talking about the First Amendment.
Yeah, it seems like people hide behind the First Amendment a lot, and I feel uneasy saying that because, the First Amendment is sacred. That's holy grail to all of us. But it's clear to me, and it should be to a lot of other people, that you can go way too far with the First Amendment because it doesn't give you the right, to foment hate speech. I mean, it just doesn't. I mean, and I apologize for this, folks. This is a very rude analogy, but I want you to get the idea of how far you can go with the First Amendment. Now, if I want to go on the air and I want to do a show about pedophilia and I want to talk about duct taping little boys' mouths shut and zip tying their hands behind their back and maybe what kind of KY I need to choose, do I really have the right to say that on the radio? Seriously? Because I have a First Amendment right? And again, I apologize. I sincerely apologize for making that very rude analogy. But again, and they'll say, that has nothing to do with, talking about Jews or other ethnics or something like that. Oh, yeah, it does. You don't have the right to have hate speech or say stuff that is so morally wrong. I mean, keep it to yourself. You just don't have that right to go out.
Or it violates the civil liberties of others. Yeah, I mean, that shit's just inappropriate.
Right. Yeah, you do have the right. I want to correct that. You do have the right to say what you want. But come on. Sure. Common frickin' sense dictates, I mean, we all have a conscience. And sometimes I think it takes leave, of absence with some people. It just boggles my mind how we can go down this road and lump a lot of people, all people, into one category and say they're evil. Just because a lot of the people at the top might be of that denomination does not mean that the Jew next door is our enemy. I mean, that is absolutely preposterous. Or the evangelical next door, or the Lutheran, the Protestant, or the Republican, or the Democrat. You name it, whatever. I'm sorry, I just hate to get so worried. But it's a sensitive issue here, and it's something that, it's just shouldn't be tolerated. I don't know. I'm at a loss of words, Joe.
No, I know, man. I know. And that's the thing. I don't want to dwell on it too much. I just want to put it out there, that now's not the time in our history, in the history of this nation, in the history of the world. Now is not the time to be bickering amongst each other like a bunch of children. Now's a bunch of time to put our big boy pants on and to do what's right, not only for ourselves, but for our children and our posterity.
Yes.
Because there's many, many a person out there that have spilt their blood to give us what we have. And I got news for you. I will not allow their death to be in vain. I will not. So with that said, I'd like to move on to one of my heroes, a guy that also works very hard to ensure that the founding fathers, their blood wasn't spilt in vain for those that died, for those that sacrificed so much. And I'm referring to Ron Paul. Now, everybody knows that Ron Paul gave his farewell speech on the House floor. In a very moving speech. There was a lot of good moments in it, 48 minutes long, 49 minutes long. So, I'm not going to play the whole thing in its entirety, even though that would make good radio. Got to be honest with you. It was very informative. It's good. He got a lot of stuff out. But there was a couple of things that he spoke about during his address. And one of them was about the alternative media or the internet. And I'd like to play that right now for everybody so that you can hear what he says. And again, Ron Paul has a lot of sway right now. Maybe not so much that he's outgoing, but he really, really brought a lot of force with him the last 4 years, maybe even the last 8. He's really gained in popularity and strength. And I don't think you're going to see the last old Ronnie once he leaves the halls of Congress.
The internet will provide the alternative to the government media complex that controls the news and most political propaganda. This is why it's essential that the internet remains free of government regulation.
Could you say it any better than that, Timmy? Right?
Nope.
And as media, and even citizen reporting, your media, whether they choose to accept you or acknowledge you or not, whether you have a press pass or not, when these bloggers out here, everybody out there that has a blog, you are the media. People go to you to look for truth, for information. And so everybody has a responsibility to ensure that you put out accurate information, that you put out reliable things, that you give people what they're looking for, honest information. So with that said, it's very important that the alternative media, instead of fighting amongst each other, band together, and let's take the bull by the horns. We're presented with an opportunity here that doesn't come too often. Our competition, the mainstream media, is shooting themselves in the foot every day to the tune of 60% of the American public don't believe what the mainstream media tells them.
They shouldn't.
And we can't even take advantage of that. So far we haven't. And so, really, we have to do some inward reflection as people, as a movement, and as the mainstream, as an alternative media, and, kind of reassess where we stand. Yeah, Ron Paul's right. This is the way of the future. The internet, and it's so important that the internet remains free of government regulation, like he said. Now, there's some pretty troubling stuff coming out of the White House today, and we'll get into that later on, too, as Obama has signed the cybersecurity executive order, and it's sealed. So
do seal them so we can't look at it. Nice.
Yeah, very PDD 51-esque. And it's just like my wife just whispered in my ear, regulation means control. And they want to control the information flow. They could do it before, with Cronkite and Dan Rather.
Yeah. Operation Mockingbird,
absolutely right. They could do it before because they controlled the outlets, but now they can't.
The internet is clearly a threat to them, and you can tell, Joe, because you see some of the commercials that come out now, and I want to point out, I won't name the name, but folks will probably see it for the car insurance commercial, where the girl's standing there, and the guy, is asking her where she gets her information from the internet. Oh, really? You do believe everything you see on the internet? And then she talks about, oh, I got to go now. Here comes my French model coming down the street. But the whole idea is they disparage the internet, like the internet is no place you can get truth or information. Yet every single major media company from the corporate media, they have an internet presence. I mean, so which way is it? It's like the mainstream media wants to tell us, oh, don't believe in the internet. Nothing you see on the internet is true. Yet every one of the bastards has got a website. And you can have it one way, but you can't have it the other, huh?
Oh, you're absolutely right, Timmy. So when we come back, I'm going to talk a little bit more, Ron Paul. And in this case, we're going to get into the secession movement because I want to talk about that. I heard some troubling things on the radio today that I'd like to address. So I do so after the break. So we'll be back in 3 minutes after the news. Don't go away. Welcome back, folks. Don't forget to tune in every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 10 p.m. to 12 a.m. Eastern for Down the Rabbit Hole with Popeye, and again on Sunday from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Great broadcast, lots of great guests, and you might actually learn something. That's Down the Rabbit Hole with Popeye. Joe Joseph here, along with Tim Watts. Timmy, you wanted to finish your thought again?
Well, just back to, the remark that Ron Paul made about the internet is the alternative to the media complex, and it truly is. But here's, something that I've noticed since 9/11. I do searches for stories, and you have had to have seen this happen too, and I'm sure some of the other hosts here as we do our research, on different topics. Right after 9/11, certain topics would come up, like, say, here's one, for example, J.P. Morgan, causing the Great Depression by, starting a rumor that one of the banks in New York was going to go insolvent. They caused a run on the banks, and how that story went. So you could do a search for that, J.P. Morgan causing the Great Depression, and you get pages of it, literally. So just the other night, I'm doing the same thing, and no longer do I see any of these stories. You know what I see? J.P. Morgan saved us from the Great Depression. It's just page upon page upon page. I think, My gosh, they're already slowly starting to control the flow of information. And now this, of course, is through Google and Bing. They're all part of it because I got the same searches from both of them. But there's information out there that's now being hidden from us. So you have to, as you said before, and as Angie does, you've got to get a proxy now. And you've got to go out and you've got to search foreign now because everything that you're getting internally here through the internet, they're starting to clamp down on. But, so it's something that we can't lose. The internet, folks, is something we absolutely have to have. When they start talking about cybersecurity bills and internet, they want to regulate this so the truth is not there. Because they're getting their balls busted on 9/11, on the anthrax attacks, government corruption, you name it. It's not happening in the mainstream media. We all know about it. Go to Orion Talk Radio to the front page, go all the way down to the lower right, and read the story on the media that we've got there. And take a look at how many of your media figures belong to the Council on Foreign Relations. And then you'll realize why you're not getting the truth in American media here. And, why they're so damn scared about the internet,
Isn't that interesting? Isn't that interesting how there are that many associated with it? And you guys can go, as a matter of fact, Timmy wrote a great piece on that on his newsfocus.org website. And you could read it about the mainstream media and who exactly is in the CFR. And those names will boggle your mind. Yeah. It really will. Because everybody... Yeah, if you do trust the mainstream media or you do find somebody on there that you trust, chances are they're part of the CFR. And, Council on Foreign Relations, very, very nefarious organization. And therein lies about what you'll hear is, because when we go over to these foreign countries, we need to have a good brief as far as, what our relations are with this country and what to expect, yada, yada, yada. That's great. But it's a think tank that shapes foreign policy decisions.
That's right.
And when you get involved with something like that, you're entangling yourself and biasing yourself. And you're not going to get honest news if you're involved with an organization like that. Yeah. So, it's just sad state of affairs.
You've heard me say it before, and I can't say it enough, and I want people to understand it, And anybody that's gone through journalism school or broadcast school will know this, if you had any good instructors. But I kid you not, the very first day, number one, they taught us about what libel was and what slander was. But they also said what the rules for good, responsible journalism were. And there was only two rules. Number one was you always follow the truth because the truth is a story. The number two rule was no untangling alliances that prevent you from following rule number one. Pretty cut and dried. But yet you see every single major anchor and all of these major media figures that we see on TV all the time that are, disseminating what we think is news to us. Every single one of them belongs to this foreign policy think tank, who again, is hell bent on, shaping foreign policy, which journalism has no part in. They're supposed to report. They're not supposed to be feeding us disinformation here in the United States.
Well, you know what, man? I don't trust the mainstream media. And I'm sure a lot of our listeners don't. That's why you're here, which is fantastic. Yeah. And another guy that doesn't, of course, is Ron Paul, Uncle Tim. And he was talking today about the secession movement. According to Infowars.com, 1.2 million people have now signed the secession petitions of, 1.2 million total. Spread out in all 50 states. And
those FEMA cots ready.
Yeah, so we'll address that. Let me play what Dr. Paul had to say about the secession movement.
Congressman Ron Paul represents Texas' 14th district. There's a story from Reuters that says 7 states qualify for secession response from White House. Citizens from more than 40 states have filed petitions with the White House seeking to secede from the Union. And by Wednesday, 7 states had gathered enough signatures to qualify for a response to the largely symbolic protest. This story has prompted a couple of questions from our audience. We've got one from Facebook. Norman wants to know whether you support the secessionist movement, and Paul on Twitter says Texas leads that charge to peacefully leave the U.S. federal government. Is it treason?
Well, I don't call for secession, but I call for the principle of secession being recognized. The founders believed in it. There's no prohibition in the Constitution against secession. They all understood that they were coming together, and if they're voluntarily coming together, they can voluntarily leave anytime they want. And that, they were protected with that belief with the 10th Amendment. But now people are said that, these people have to be put on a list, that they saying that there should be a right of secession, and they want to put them on a list that they're committing treason, put in prison, or thrown out of the country. What about the First Amendment? So no, the principle of secession is very important, not so much for the purpose of seceding, but the purpose of saying to the federal government, if you mistreat us, that's what we might consider. So I don't think anybody's serious about that happening soon or anything else. But if you just had that principle, that nullification is the same thing. What if the states could nullify the law? Look how wonderful it would have been to solve the problem of Obamacare if the states could just nullify the thing and get out of it. And so nullification and secession should always be there. The New England states in the early part of the 19th century talked about secession. Nobody condemned them for it. Secession is what we did when we left England. We seceded from England. It was a wonderful thing. And nobody complained about the secession of the Eastern Bloc nations seceding and getting out of the communist bloc. So, no, this whole idea, the hysteria in opposition and condemning these people as being un-American because they even talk about secession, because they talk about it doesn't mean that they're leading the charge. I'm sure there are people who would like to do that. But my position is that the principle of secession should always be there. And if it had been there, along with nullification, believe me, this federal government would be not the size it is today.
And he makes a great point, Tim, in that just the threat of secession and nullification would really, really help rein in some of this big government spending and a lot of the bad policy decisions that have been made over the years. However, do I believe that secession is the answer? No, I don't believe that secession is the answer. No. And I think you agree with me there, don't you?
Absolutely, yeah. I don't believe in that either. I mean, because it plays to the, what the powers that be want to do. I mean, what do they want to do? They want a new world order. What stands in the way of the new world order? The United States and the American citizens who love their freedom, who love their liberty, who love their constitution, and who have a hell of a lot of guns.
And don't forget.
In simple states, that's tough.
Right, and not to mention the fact that, don't forget that the military is ours. It's ours. It's the American people's. It's not the United States government. It belongs to the American people. We have the mightiest military in the world. And the last thing you want to do is give up the fight and just end up seceding. And then what? Where do all those resources go? What happens? How do you defend yourself? How do you defend a sovereign state against an aggressive foreign power?
Exactly.
These are all things that you have to think about when that happens. But Dr. Paul's right when he says that, we have to consider the option of secession and nullification. You have to do it, if for nothing else, because the Declaration of Independence calls it out. To alter or abolish a form of government and institute a new form of government. If that's what it takes, then fine. But be very careful, because it can open up a huge can of worms. We'll be right back after these messages, where we'll get into a little bit more about what Tim and I are talking about. Stay tuned. That you can take Orion Talk Radio with you wherever you go by listening to us on your smartphone with the TuneIn app. Just download the free software, then do a search for Orion Talk Radio. Save us as a preset, and you can listen to Orion anytime, anywhere. Orion Talk Radio on TuneIn, a must-have for your smartphone. Joe Joseph and Tim Watson, we're talking about the state secession petitions on whitehouse.gov. And Timmy, I was listening to Alex Jones' broadcast today. I'll tell you what, he was in rare form today. And some of the stuff I agreed with. Some of the stuff I didn't. He's calling for a second American Revolution. I think there needs to be a definite and a swift change in direction as far as where this country's going. One thing I want to get into in hour two, folks, is the economic numbers, because they're really, really bad. They're abysmal, as a matter of fact. And of course, I expected this because, up to the election, they're going to cook the books. They have to. They always do. It's like Ronald Reagan said, there's lies, damn lies, then statistics.
Yep.
And you can manipulate statistics any way. You've heard me use the analogy, 100% of cancer patients drink water.
Yeah, very good.
Ooh, yeah. So, you can skew statistics any way you want. However, the statistics coming out of the Bureau of Economic... boy, I even forgot the acronym. Good grief. But the U.S. government labor statistics this week, way, way higher. Unemployment is going to, start to steadily increase once again. But here's the thing. We need to change the direction. If you have a problem with the federal government in its current form and you want to secede, why are you asking the White House for permission?
Yeah, that's the part that's just insane.
It doesn't compute. Now, hear me out here, Timmy. If you wrote a letter where you air your grievances, much like the Declaration of Independence, I could understand that. You're not asking permission at that point. You're laying it out on the line.
Yep, absolutely.
Right? But these petitions need to be taken to your state houses, because it's your states that would decide whether you secede or not.
Yep.
And that's the thing. So the proper venue for this would be at the state level, not at the federal level. You don't ask your jailer for permission to get out. What the hell is he going to say? Oh, yeah, you know what? Yeah, you've been good, boy. You go now. No, of course not. You don't ask your jailer to be free. Hell no, you're going to get beat down.
Yeah,
what do you think is going to happen?
The point is well taken, Joey. You got to think about it, folks. You're asking to secede from the Union, and it's a petition on the White House's website. Seriously? Right. Just think about that for 2 seconds. It shouldn't take anybody even 1 second. The White House is putting up a petition for you to secede from the Union. That's just insane. It's absolutely insane. And Joe's absolutely right. This starts at the state level. So essentially, and a lot of people have thrown this thought out there, what you're doing when you put your name on that petition is you've now become a target for someone that they can watch and they can follow because DHS does it, and we all know they do it. It's been happening since 9/11. Now, a good case in point, a couple years ago, they had a petition on the same thing, whitehouse.gov, where they went, do you folks want to look into 9/11? Do you want another investigation of 9/11? Tons of people signed that thing. And I think they even had a bare minimum number that you had to reach, before maybe, it was a really diminutive number, really small, of signatures that they needed. And I know that they achieved all those signatures, but yet, where's that other investigation of 9/11? You follow me? So it's not doing
That's a very good question, Tim. Yeah. So basically what you're saying is lawless people aren't going to follow the law. So what the hell do you – why? What are you doing? And, to Alex Jones's point, and this is where he's right. Yes, people are making a stink, and that's a good thing. They're getting out there and they're making a stink. The problem is it's the wrong venue. And he brought up Glenn Beck today because Glenn Beck was saying that, no, you shouldn't, because if you sign that petition, you're going to be on a list. Yeah, probably so. Remember, this is the same people that have brought to you the term domestic terrorist, and that if you can your food or you pack your ammo in watertight containers, you're a domestic terrorist. This is the same organization that frowns on, or same government that frowns on prepping, and the same people that took the government's advice and they followed it and they relied on them right now are suffering horribly up in New York because they didn't prep, because they weren't personally responsible to take care of themselves in the event of a natural disaster. And just like Ann said, anybody that signed that petition is on a list already anyway.
Oh yeah.
So but that's fine. And something, I'm not scared of being on a list. Probably on a list, probably on a couple lists, probably on 100 lists. Mm-hmm. But what I'm saying is that you have to address it in the proper venue. And the proper venue is not the federal government. You are trying to make a point with the federal government, so you need to take it up with the state legislatures and let the state houses deal with this and petition your state representatives and legislature or your selectmen or whoever.
Yeah.
So that's my point on that. Any thoughts, Timmy? And even Glenn Beck, a broken clock's right twice a day.
Yeah. I think the call for an American revolution is just, again, that's like one of those extreme last measures. Yeah, it worked at one time in the old day when we had muskets, but you know what? They've got drones now, folks, and they just put 30,000 of them over America, and they all have the capability to take your ass out, whenever
There's a good reason why they GPS'd your front door during the last census.
Damn straight.
Remember that.
Yep. So if your name's on a list, and Joe's right, they GPS'd your door during the last census, so now you're on a list, and maybe a fight does break out, an American revolution. Well, do you know how easy it's going to be able to pick every one of us off with a drone? Zero in on that doorstep, kaboom! All right, that homegrown terrorist is gone. Kaboom! That homegrown terrorist is gone. No, we're fighting. My point is though, we're fighting a very well armed, military now, and NDAA has given them permission to come into play now as law enforcement in America, which is, we know, expressly prohibited posse comitatus. So I guess I'm just saying that's a hell of an uphill battle to say, let's start that American revolution right now. Don't get me wrong, it's a noble thought, but way more doable back in the days of our forefathers than it probably is now.
But is it though? Because see now, back then there was protocol and men of honor and rules of war and things like that we have the Geneva Conventions. They don't follow that crap. But I will tell you this, that look at the Afghan people and look at how they've fended off both Russia and the United States with what? Do you see what I'm saying? Oh, it can happen. There are how many guns in this country? How many people are armed? And how many people are trained? Much more trained than the Afghans. Let me tell you something. They don't want to pick that fight. And you not only have that, but you have the world watching too. So if something was to happen that way, Tim, the backlash just from crimes against humanity would be just tremendous. So, I mean, that's the gray area, though. See, it's the same thing with everything else. Say you open up a constitutional convention. you open up that Constitution to be edited, you're asking for trouble. And same thing with seceding. Yes, there's some good points to it. There's some risk there too. And same with a second American Revolution. Yeah, is there some benefit to it? Okay. But when you do a risk-benefit analysis, gosh darn it, man, the risk outweigh the benefits. You have to look at it like, how did we get into this mess? It was 100 years plus of co-opting the education system, of entangling, lobbying and government, and having the corporations merge with the state almost. So you have like this fascist type of system set up in the United States. It took time to get there, though, and it's not going to unravel itself in a day. This is a war. This is a war where knowledge is power, and the only way to undo it, Tim, is to teach people. That's really the best way to do it.
Excellent point, Joe, and that's something that people miss. They've been at this, folks, since 1913, all right? That's when the coup on America started. They've been at this, and it's taken them a long time to take away everything that they've taken away. So don't think it's just going to happen overnight. And back to my point about the fact that we are fighting a very heavily armed military. And you got to go back and look at, oh, God, who is it? John B. Alexander, wasn't he the father of non-lethal weaponry? I mean, they've got so much non-lethal stuff. But here's another thing to think about. They have policies in place right now for just such a thing. And I talked about this with Jim Fetzer on his show one night, about the fact that they have all sorts of scenarios right now, and it includes poisoning mass populations in order to maintain control. It's a very scary thing, and you brought it up the other night, Joe, about the chemtrails in the sky. So let's just say, you've got the entire state of Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa decide to go rogue, and, there's going to be a big secession movement, and the people are all worked up. Well, how hard is it to take out a lot of people there? We fly over those states, drop a little poison. Folks, don't think it's crazy, because those plans are in place.
That's right. Hour number 1 is done. Hour number 2 is on the way. When we come back, we'll talk about the war on the middle class. We'll talk about the executive order that Obama signed, and also talk about some economic data. So don't go anywhere, folks. So much more to talk about. We'll be back after the top of the hour news. It's hour number 2 of the Freedom Link here, everybody. And Joe Joseph and Tim Watts. And, my wife just brought something to my attention, believe it or not. And I haven't heard much about this, Timmy.
Is she whispering in your ear again?
Yeah, she's whispering something's wrong. Okay, so anyway, she's got... She was snooping on whitehouse.gov again. Oh, boy, I tell you what. She just can't get enough of that. And so she found this executive order that was signed on October 26th, establishing the White House Homeland Security Partnership Council. Isn't that interesting? It's very similar, Tim, to that strategic implementation plan that was put in place that got law enforcement and the federal agencies kind of tied together, working together, right? Well, now there's this White House Homeland Security Partnership Council, and what it does is it establishes steering committees, right? The steering committee, let me tell you some of the purposes of the steering committee, okay?
Start up a council membership.
Oh, she wants me to start a council membership. Okay, it says there is established a White House Homeland Security Partnership Council to foster local partnerships between the federal government and the private sector, non-governmental organizations, foundations, community-based organizations, and state, local, tribal, and territorial governments and law enforcement to address Homeland Security challenges. The council shall be chaired by the Assistant to the President of Homeland Security and Counterterrorism, or a designee from the National Security Staff.
Not elected.
So basically, it's another czar, if you will. Jawohl. Now, the steering committee that's established is it's very interesting. Its job is to advise the chair and steering committee members on priorities, challenges, and opportunities for local partnerships to support Homeland Security priorities, as well as regularly reporting to the steering committee on the council's effort. So remember now, folks, this steering committee membership, your localities, your organizations, all that stuff. Your churches can all be members of the steering committee. The steering committee is, let me tell you this. The steering committee shall include a representative at the deputy agency head level or that representative's designee for the following agencies. Listen to this. Department of State, Department of Treasury, Department of Defense, Department of Justice, Department of Interior, Agriculture, Commerce, Labor, Health and Human Services, Housing and Urban Development, Transportation, Energy, Education, Veterans Affairs, Homeland Security, Director of National Intelligence, the EPA, the Small Business Administration, and the FBI.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's just the governmental agencies. Then you have the localities that can all request membership. You have private business that can request membership, and all of them are working to implement these security priorities, these Homeland Security priorities. And so it goes. Another mission of this steering committee is to promote Homeland Security priorities and opportunities for collaboration between the federal government field offices and state, local, and tribal and territorial stakeholders. It also is to advise and confer with state, local, tribal, and territorial stakeholders and agencies interested in expanding or building local Homeland Security partnerships, meaning that here we are, we're the federal government, we're going to embed ourselves in your locality, and we're going to push our agenda on you. That's what I just said. Thank you very much. So,
is executive signing order?
This is an executive order.
I'm so tired of those.
Yeah. Yeah, me too. So, I mean, this is something that has to be looked at. And, folks, this is something that has to be talked about. Once again, we're seeing the federal government try to get all lovey-dovey with the locality pushing their agenda. And this is something that we just don't need more of. There is no threat. And any threat that there is, Tim, is simply blowback from our foreign policy run amok.
Absolutely. We go kill every country, take their resources, and we wonder why people are pissed off at us.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a very surprising, and I'm surprised that nobody's really talked about this. This is something that's been totally overlooked, especially with Sandy and everything.
Yeah. But was it any real surprise, Joe? Because remember when the SIP came out, they didn't talk about the SIP. They didn't talk about NDAA. You know, when they passed NDAA, he signed it on New Year's Eve, a drinking holiday, and then what was it, NDRP? He signs on St. Patrick's Day, another drinking holiday. When, it's bad enough it's on a weekend when the news law is pretty much nil and none, but yet it was a drinking holiday. It's like they saved the two biggest things they didn't want us to see for specific occasions when people might be hungover or just don't have the wherewithal to follow up. And yeah, it's very disturbing how these things are being pushed through, and we don't have any say in them whatsoever. I'm so tired of executive signing orders. I mean, it's like the federal government has forgot the term "we the people." It doesn't mean anything to them anymore.
It totally usurps the whole legislative process. Executive orders were not meant to legislate from. And again, you can look at this executive order and say, well, it has to do with the Department of Government, and he's just establishing protocol within the Department of Government, which does fall within an executive order purview. But you have to look at what's going on behind that, and these councils and everything like that. Where's the funding coming from for these councils? Funding has to be appropriated in Congress. Is this coming from existing DHS funding? Are they going to require more funding to implement this? I would imagine they would, especially if you're going to if you're talking about implementing different strategies and things like that at the local level, you're going to have to grease some palms. It's just the way it is. Where's that money going to come from? Now we're legislating from the executive office, and have been for quite some time, obviously. But surprised that this hasn't gotten more attention. Very, very similar to that strategic implementation plan. Extremely similar to it, But we are under siege. We are under siege in this country. And, if it's not through executive fiat, if it's not through these oppressive police state powers that are being pushed down our throats, then it's the eradication of the middle class. And, Tim, as we finish up this first segment and getting into the next segment, you can see that, since the Bush tax cuts were enacted, the rich have almost what was the figure you said? They doubled their wealth?
Doubled their wealth. And actually what it was the top 400 Americans. Now, if you take a look at how many billionaires we have in this country, at that time, there was 401. Really? Okay, so what did the Bush tax cuts do? They benefited the very, very, very wealthy, the real problem in this country. So all the billionaires, the top 400 people in this country, doubled their money under the Bush tax cuts. And so when they bitch now about they want more, I'm like, dude, give it up. You made some money. We're all struggling out here. Really? Seriously? You want to make more after you already doubled your billions? I'm sorry. I'm not saying, I'm not taking that. It's just not right.
No, and I'm right there with you. Now, I'm all for, I was kind of, it's so hard when you start talking about taxes. Mm-hmm. It's so hard to look at the way that things have gone and then read the Constitution and see how it's supposed to be. And it's hard to swallow how we've gotten so far off course.
Yeah,
the problem is though that there is you'd have to return to a constitutional form of government in order to be able to roll some of these taxes back and everything else, but people want more. Well, where's it going to come from? Well, let me tell you something. The middle class is being decimated. And when we come back, I want to give you Al Gore's thoughts on how he can solve the current fiscal cliff that's coming. And oh, by the way, it's at the cost and expense of the middle class. So don't go away, folks. We'll be right back after these messages. Folks, welcome back. Ryan Talk Radio wants to hear from you. Give us a call with your comments and suggestions on the Orion Talk Radio Newsline. That's 888-272-4434. Tell us what you think, and we might play your comments on the air. At Orion, we care about what you think, so call us with your comments on how we're doing and what we can do to serve you better, our loyal Orion listeners. That number again, 888-272-4434. Now, before we move on, Tim, you notice how they slipped that legislation, that executive order in during all the election mayhem?
Yeah. And that's actually where I wanted to go. I just wanted to bring that back up again. You mentioned, it's a surprise that nobody talked about. But, you and I know better. It's not really, because they did NDAA the same way. They did the SIP the same way. They did NDRP that way. And they also did HR 658. Folks, none of that was in the media. None of it. So you got to realize your media has lied to you big time. And if you don't get it that the media is in bed with these people and they are part of the plan by now, you are totally missing the big picture. All of these bills, back in the day, somebody proposed legislation like any of these, there would have been a huge debate. There would have been, editorials in the paper, there'd be front page stuff, but you didn't see anything about NDAA, the SIP, the NDRP, or HR 658, which puts 30,000 drones in the air over America. And somehow that's just not newsworthy, is it, Joe?
Geez, I guess it's not. No. So, wake up, people. This is really getting out of control. I mean, and to be honest with you, this executive order, you got to be pissed. I mean, this is...
It's not just big government, folks. Big government do this stuff, but you know what? If we had a responsible media, part of the checks and balances in this country,
right?
Again, none of this would have happened. A lot of people would have been swinging from trees by now or been behind bars, but our media is part of it, and they have failed us miserably, and for that reason, we have to hold them accountable as accessories to all of these crimes that have happened to us, every single one of them.
That's right. And you want to know something, Tim? The media, of course, not only fails to expose this corruption, expose this tyranny that's happening in the United States, but it also pushes the agenda.
Absolutely.
It's the main propaganda mouthpiece for the powers that be, for these elitists, quote unquote. And one of them, Al Gore, is talking about how the United States could avoid the fiscal cliff, if you will. Listen to this.
It's what we burn, not what we earn.
So I want to talk about what everyone's talking about today, the fiscal cliff. Okay, it's become a 24/7 debate. And so I want to try to go back in history because you famously cast the tie-breaking vote in 1993 to pass the Clinton-Gore budget, which raised taxes and cut spending. So if you were sitting with the Congress today, what would you say to them, and what should they be doing?
Now, before I answer, remind me, how did the economy do in the Clinton-Gore years?
Well, we had a balanced budget, and we had, I think, over 20 million jobs created. So it seemed to be pretty good.
And I'll tell you, in the political realm, some people don't believe this, but the single most popular proposal we had was to reduce taxes on working people and lift the higher rate. Let's give an incentive to work, and let's ask the most fortunate in our society, including me and you, to do our fair share. And we ought to do that again, absolutely. And the solution to the fiscal cliff is obviously going to be a combination of new revenue and spending cuts. And the president is making it very clear that he's holding firm, insisting that the highest
top 2%
earners, the most fortunate in our society economically, are going to have to pay more. But you know, the fiscal cliff does have a relationship to the climate cliff. And one way to back away from the climate cliff and the fiscal cliff is with a tax on carbon. And you can reduce other taxes to further give a break to middle-income families, but tax what we burn, not what we earn. Well, dirty energy causes...
That whole thing has never made sense to me, you know?
No, it hasn't to me either, especially since, I mean, are we going to... I guess we should charge the Martians carbon taxes, too, because Mars is getting warmer. And it's not because of man-bear pig and cow farts. Herein lies the problem. Al Gore makes a ton of money on carbon tax, on carbon credits, because he started the whole carbon-based tax system. So he's going to profit wonderfully from it. And in turn, I don't mind paying my fair share. What is that, Al Gore? What is your fair share? I would really like to know. Because I doubt it's what the middle-class Americans are paying as a percentage of their income. So there's agendas here. And look into Al Gore a little bit and see what companies he started. And see how he would benefit from something like that. Oh, yeah, we'll save the fiscal cliff. All you got to do. You know, science shows, Tim, that global warming actually stopped 16 years ago. 16 years ago. But we are dealing with cosmic changes, not poop and methane and farts and everything else. It has nothing to do with that. I mean, we need to be good stewards of the environment. Absolutely. I totally agree with that. You know, but at the same time, let's be real.
Yeah, you know, and again, this is one of those really, really tough issues for people to get their head around. I mean, I'm looking at it right now, and I'm reading some of the stuff, and it's like, wow, this is all garbage. It just, I don't see anything that makes sense about it. But back to Gore, you know, I don't think he's the only one that's going to benefit. Obviously the rich money powers, I think, are probably going to be the big benefactors from this. I think in Gore's case, you know, and like any politician, they reward the ones that kind of put stuff in place for them. Like, okay, you got this in place for us. We're going to let you make some money on this. But I can guarantee you there's going to be other people that are going to make a ton of money on this. And I'm looking at right now on Google, I just did a quick search for carbon credits. I'm stunned. There's like 3 credits companies here for selling carbon credits already. Remtech.net, sagemetering.com, elementmarkets.com. Purchase your emission credits, carbon credit flow meters. I had no idea this was out there already.
And Gore came up with the whole system on how to trade carbon credits.
Yep, and then carboncredits.com, there's more, yeah.
Right, so I mean, of course it would be in his interest. And then he says, well, and then we lower taxes on our lower costs on the middle class, and then we sell these carbon credits. Well, okay, so if companies have to pay for carbon credits, they're going to roll that cost down to the consumer. It's just that simple. Your electric bill is going to go up. The cost to produce things are going to go up. Everything's going to go up, as if it's not going up fast enough with the Federal Reserve totally nuking our economy. You're going to add this, and you think that saves us from a fiscal cliff? I mean, I think it just accelerates it. But fine. Hey, you want to accelerate it? No problem. Whatever. I actually wish they would. Just get it over with already, you know? If you're going to crash the economy, do it! Unbelievable. Unbelievable. Heck, I guess we'll get into economy when we come back, since we're talking economy, Tim.
Very good.
Yeah, we'll do a little bit of jobless claims. Isn't it interesting how the jobless claims a week after the election jump? And I just don't mean by a little bit. So we'll talk about that when we come back. Don't go away, folks. You're listening to the Freedom Link on the Orion Talk Radio Network. You know, when I'm getting ready for the broadcast, one of the radio shows I listen to is The Sound of Freedom with Ryan Brooks. Every Monday to Friday from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern. Ryan is a U.S. Army vet who found his awakening while serving in Afghanistan. He brings the truth to evening radios throughout America, and you can listen to him every Monday to Friday, 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Orion Talk Radio Network. Joe Joseph and Tim Watts, we're talking about the economy. You know, we were talking about carbon credits and just how that seems to be the solution to the fiscal cliff for Al Gore. But let's get into some more of the economy. Now, of course, you guys know last week was the election, and prior to that, we've had some very interesting economic data showing, signs of improvement. When all of us, you know, down here at the at street level, we don't feel any improvement. If anything, it's getting a lot harder. But, you know, like I said, statistics. They is what they is. So anyway, jobless claims in U.S. surprisingly jumped last week, and they're attributing it to Sandy. Now, I'm sure Sandy has some effect. I'm not going to say it doesn't. But again, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the BLS, right? Yeah, more like BS. Came out with a new jobless applications for jobless benefits. You know, the numbers jumped by 78,000 to a seasonally adjusted 439,000 people. Now, that's above the 400,000 threshold. And typically when you see that, you are in recession. Now, Timmy, if a lot of that had to do with Sandy, then how come New York wasn't one showing the most gain in jobless claims? And let's take it a step further, Timmy. Can you name me the top two states that gained in this last week? Mind you, that the election was last week. So they would be two very important states in the election.
Wouldn't be Ohio, would it?
I don't have a soundboard up, but I'll ding, 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 ding. There you go. So Ohio's one.
I'll take states that house John King for number two.
Yes, that would be the mighty state of Pennsylvania. Yes. So Pennsylvania and Ohio showed the largest gains last week, yet they attribute it to Sandy. And anybody can go to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and you can look this stuff up. So the rhetoric does not match the numbers. And this is what's happening, folks. See, they've cooked the books during the election cycle to make you feel like, oh, yeah, it's not so bad after all. Oh, yeah, we believe what we're being told here. But in all actuality, the economy's been in a very, very slow death spiral for quite some time. I mean, yes, since 2008, when 2008 went down and the government intervened, any growth that happened after that was government fueled. You know, and that's the thing. People don't understand. It's not just $787 billion. That was just a pittance. The Federal Reserve can actually take that and spend it 18 times over. And they do that. $787 billion being a pittance, Tim. Good grief. And the thing is that's our money. Now, you may not feel like it's your money because you don't touch it. You don't feel it. It's not benefiting you in any way. But it's saddling our progeny with generations of debt. And something that's not, ask any real economist, and they'll tell you that debt, you're never going to get paid off.
No.
It's just not going to happen. You know? But the goal is to destroy the economy, not to pay it back. Yep. You know, they want to cancel all this debt out and start over with the one world currency.
Yep. Like
the credit-based monetary system.
Do we dare go back to our simple analogy that, you and I made probably a year ago at this time, and that's, how they made the wrong approach to this whole thing. Now, $16 trillion we know for certain that they gave out through bailouts. We found that out through the Fed audit, the one and only time the Fed's been audited, partial audit, mind you. That came from Bernie Sanders, and he's the one that reported $16 trillion. Now, you and I did the math. $16 trillion given to, I think it was just people of working age, not to everybody in America, but just people working age. So let's take people 18 plus. That's a check for $100,000+ for every single American. And as we said, you do that to people. Think about what that's going to do for the economy, because the first thing it does, it gets rid of what our biggest problem we had, the mortgage crisis. Because people that have $100,000 some odd dollars in their pocket, that's going to help that. Now you're going to go out and buy stuff, which is going to stimulate retail. Suddenly that's going to stimulate manufacturing. And then where does that money go after it goes through retail and manufacturing? But, the banks. But no, they bypassed all of us and they went straight to the banks. Now, you tell me, folks, which do you think would have stimulated the economy more, giving that money to the rich people who are already well insulated from problems, or giving it to people like us who actually need it, who are dying in this country right now? They thought about this. It's been well thought out. Again, people who have master's degrees in finance, and this is the best they could come up with?
Yeah, I'm going to get stereotypical for a second.
Go ahead.
Do you mind if I do that? Now, if all that happened, and I'm for it too, don't get me wrong, you'd have saved government motors in a heartbeat. Mm-hmm. And Alcoa, oh man, they would be loving it, because that just about everybody in America, baby, would have an Escalade and some rims. You know how that is, baby. It'd be like Escalade City. And, of course, the law of supply and demand. Now, of course, you have Escalades that cost $200,000 because everybody wants an Escalade. But you're absolutely right. You take that money and say pay down a mortgage or pay off credit card debt. Not only are you benefiting Main Street, but the banks end up getting the money anyway.
Yeah, it's a win-win for everybody. But yet they avoided that.
Because then they don't have you under their thumb as much.
That's right.
You're not a slave. You're not a debt slave as much. And they can't have that.
And debt is control. Debt is their control mechanism.
That's right. The goal wasn't to save the economy. The goal was to loot it. And they did it quite well. I mean, they were good at it. And so what's next? What's coming down the road? Down the Clinton administration, they had already talked about confiscating retirements. Taking that 401k, and in exchange, we will offer you treasuries. Because it's what's more reliable than treasuries, Tim?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, I mean, in all honesty, though, from a government debt perspective, the United States is probably still one of the most sound government debt instruments. The only problem is all these governments they're all bankrupt. Oh, except for China. Yeah. And Russia already went through bankruptcy, and now they're probably in a lot better shape than we are. So all I can say is, folks, from an economic standpoint, we are really, 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 really at the precipice. And I don't mean fiscal cliff. That's all BS. How does it feel when you wake up in the morning? How does it feel when you go to the grocery store? And each time you go, something costs more than it did the last time. You know? When the prices, gosh, I remember when I could shop for my family and $300 worth of groceries would get me through 2 weeks.
Yeah.
Now $800 worth of groceries don't even get me through 2 weeks.
I hate to seem like George H.W. Bush here, because I remember that moment, you know, when he was standing there in this, the supermarket when he was running for president, and he was like, oh, look at the scanners. Remember that one? He didn't know they had scanners, you know?
Yeah.
Well, you know, I hate to plead that kind of ignorance, but, you know, I don't get it out to the stores. You know, my wife does all the shopping, and we were just talking this week, and she's telling me about, you know, the price of a gallon of milk. And I was like, when the hell did that happen? You know, I guess I got to blame myself, been a little out of touch, letting the wife handle that stuff. But I'm stunned by how much food has gone up. And she comes home all the time and says, you won't believe what this costs now and what this costs. And it's just going up exponentially higher and higher and higher. I don't know. I don't see where it's going to work out for us.
Yeah. And Angie just says, you know, we jumped off the cliff and we're doing a swan dive towards the bottom right now. Yeah, you're doggone right we are. I fail to see how, unless there's a serious change of thought and posture in this country, how we're going to be able to save the economy in its present form. I don't know how it's going to happen. Folks, last segment of the broadcast coming up. When we come back, Cybersecurity Act. We'll be right back. I'd like to thank everybody for tuning in and listening tonight, and remind you that tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern, Morning Brew kicks off with Gwen Caldwell. Up-to-date news and information, plus some of the best guests you'll hear on Midday Radio. Check out the Morning Brew with Gwen weekdays at 12 noon right here on Orion Talk Radio. And so our last stop on the Freedom Link Express takes us to the White House again, as if the shenanigans with this executive order on establishing the White House Homeland Security Partnership Council isn't enough. Now we have the Obama cybersecurity executive order. Because, of course, you know, Congress couldn't come to some sort of agreement on it. So that means that the president has to usurp it and legislate again from his desk. And, Timmy, I've got a problem with this because this cybersecurity executive order is sealed.
Yeah.
You know?
The way they always do it when they want to hide something from you, they always seal it. How can anything be sealed like that when it has to do with, again, we the people, something that they just don't get anymore?
That's right. Now, this is Steve Watson, Infowars.com, reporting. It says, following yesterday's defeat of the draconian cybersecurity legislation in the Senate, it was revealed that back in mid-October, President Obama signed off on a secret directive that will enable the U.S. military to use newly created computer viruses to attack any organization or country deemed to be a cyber threat. If you remember, on the last broadcast, I was talking about Stuxnet and how they had many variations of Stuxnet to handle different things. The Washington Post cited several U.S. officials speaking under anonymity in a report on the development last night. Quote, the new directive is the most extensive White House effort to date to wrestle with what constitutes an offensive and defensive action in the rapidly evolving world of cyber war and cyber terrorism, the report states. What does it really mean for the first time, or what it does really mean for the first time, is it explicitly talks about how we'll use cyber operations. Network defense is what you're doing inside your own network. Cyber operations is stuff outside that space, and recognizing that you could be doing that for what might be called defensive purposes. An example of defense cyber operation that once would have been considered an offensive act, for instance, might include stopping a computer attack by severing the link between an overseas server and a targeted domestic computer. Oh, an on-off switch. Essentially in the same way, the Bush administration employed terms such as preemptive when considering the invasion of Iraq. The Obama administration has shrouded its cyber policy in language that legally allows the military to go on the offensive, except this time the battleground is cyberspace, which the Pentagon has defined as another military domain to be dominated. The Washington Post even acknowledges that the Stuxnet virus was developed by the U.S. in conjunction with Israel and was unleashed on Iran in 2010. Remarkably, however, it spins this fact on its head, suggesting that, quote, if an advisory should turn a similar virus against, an adversary should turn a similar virus against U.S. computer systems, whether public or private, the government needs to be ready to preempt or respond. And the evidence suggested that the Stuxnet virus designed to damage centrifuges at Iran's nuclear facility was, in fact, developed and created by U.S. and Israel. The idea was immediately branded, oh, wild conspiracy theory, why, cracky you tinfoil hatters, you, by sections of the corporate media who pinned the blame on Russia or China before it was finally revealed in 2011, January, by the New York Times that the wild conspiracy theorists were actually spot on. Imagine that, Tim.
You know, that Stuxnet virus is starting to sound a whole lot like the, remember the Inslaw Promise software?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's a show in and of itself.
Yep, it's like that, a whole new all-encompassing software package. And real quick, this is on the front page of Orion this week. Did you see that they're now saying the Stuxnet virus made it into Chevron stations in California, Chevron gas stations?
No.
And here's the key about that. Chevron, folks, if you don't know, Chevron is Standard Oil. It's one of the last remaining Standard Oil things. And so who owns Standard Oil? The Rockefellers. And you really think the Rockefellers are somehow going to let this happen to their Chevron stations? To me, there's something rotten in Denmark on that one when they say that Stuxnet is affecting Chevron stations in California. Sounds like a good idea or a good way to raise gas prices again is what it sounds like.
Well, as if they're not already high enough. Oh, and by the way, that was another thing, too, people can't believe, these statisticians. They can't believe, oh, well, I can't imagine. Gas prices have been on the decrease, on the decline, so I can't imagine how, we got such horrible numbers. Really?
Mm.
Really? Now, where I'm at, I think one of the cheapest gas stations I saw was like $3.09 a gallon. And that's not cheap, folks. But see, they got you used to it now. They got you used to paying that $3, $3.50 or whatever. So now when you get to $3, you're like, oh, what a bargain. Or even like $2.75. Oh, wow, man, this is awesome. It's Miller time. I mean, really?
Good person to talk to about that would be Rudy Z, our morning host from London, and ask him about the price of gas in England, because that's where we're going, folks.
Yeah, now remember, in England, they charge per liter. It's not even per gallon, it's per liter. And they pay more per liter than we do per gallon.
Yeah, that's outrageous.
It is outrageous. And you can listen to Rudy Z every morning, 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern, right here on the Orion Talk Radio Network. Fantastic host. Definitely coming with some good information. Now, one thing that, here you go, ready? This is it. Right now, in London, England, the current price of gas, now I'm going to equate it per gallon, is nearly $10. Yeah. Yep. Nearly $10. So they're paying $10 a gallon for gas.
Wow.
6.22 pounds. I mean, unbelievable, dude.
I'm biking at that point, dude.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it's England. I mean, you might as well. It's a pretty crowded place, And not to mention, I'd never get used to driving on the wrong side of the road. But you're right, $10 a gallon. Good grief. I mean, even at that price, even driving a moped gets expensive, So, yeah. I mean, we're not the only ones suffering here, folks. I mean, the whole world's in crisis. As a matter of fact, it just came out today that Europe is now in recession. Oh, really? Europe's on the verge of collapse? And you go and say, oh, yes, well, we slipped back into recession. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Spain's got an unemployment rate higher than we were at the height of the Great Depression. And they just slipped back into depression, into recession. Do you see the problems? I mean, unbelievable.
Yeah.
So, I mean, understand, folks, what you hear from the mainstream media. If there's anything that you glean from this program tonight, understand this. What you hear from the mainstream media, flush it down the toilet. Whoosh. That's what you should hear. Instead of hearing people talking on the boob tube when you're watching the mainstream media, you should hear a toilet flushing. Because that's exactly what you should be doing to that information. And instead...
sound of vomit.
Oh, yeah. Bleh, that's good, too. I've had enough of that the last couple of days. I don't need any more of that. But, but in all honesty, really, use the internet as a tool to find good, honest information. And it's hard because there's a lot of disinfo out there. There's a lot of forces that work against. A lot of forces that work against.
As I was mentioning before, searches that I used to do 10, 12 years ago after 9/11 that brought up a plethora of information no longer bring it up. I mean, I'm on like the 20th page of Google before I find out what I'm looking for. So, folks, start looking now and get that information before they've hidden it all.
Yeah, you know what a lot of people do, including my wife. She does very well at trying to drum up stories, especially when I'm trying to prep in a pinch. But she also uses a proxy, and that proxy allows her to be able to surf from other countries, which is good because you can get by the Google censorship or whatever by going in through another country. I did the same thing when I was investigating the Leo Wanta case. If you search Leo Wanta, you find very little in the United States in a Google search.
Yeah.
But if you go in through Germany or you go in through England, it's like a cornucopia of knowledge. Same thing with 9/11. You want to research 9/11? Don't do it going through a U.S. server. You have to go through it through a German server or go through an English server or another country's server. If you do that, you find many more sources and much more accurate and reliable information because they're not censoring that because Germans typically aren't worried about 9/11 truth right now. You know what I mean? So
Germans?
Well, I'm just saying in general.
Okay.
And holy moly, we're right up against the
wow.
Tim.
That went fast.
Yeah, way fast. Folks, don't forget to tune into Conspiracy Chronicles Sunday night, 7 p.m. Eastern. It was great to be with everybody tonight, and we hope to see you again on Sunday evening. So until then, I'm Joe Joseph, along with Tim Watts. Have a pleasant evening, everybody. Take care.
Night, Joey. Night, everyone.